welcome to Talk This.
It's dangerous to podcast alone.
I'm your let's make dumb jokes about every moment of gameplay host, Madeline.
I'm your let's never talk host, Emma.
And thanks for tuning in to another episode. This week it's a side quest, so it's Emma's turn to pick the topic that we'll be discussing on this podcast episode. So Emma, what are we going to be chatting about this time?
Yeah, this time we're going to be talking about Let's Plays and streamers and the whole culture around sharing your gameplay experiences with other people on the interwebs. I think we've touched upon this briefly before, either in one of our old format ones, or possibly when we were talking about copyright. Because I seem to recall talking about this a little bit before, but we haven't had like a full episode on it. So now we're going to go more in depth into everything.
Well, listeners, let me start off by saying that if you want the widest variety and different festive options, Party City is really the way to go for streamers.
Oh, there's your funny jokes, huh?
No, actually, this episode we're just going to play another episode of Talk This, and we'll, talk over it.
I think that would be awful. It'd be so much talking. I guess you could do it like director's commentary version, where you sort of muffle the original track while the, director's commentary plays over it. But I think because we have the exact same voices, I feel like that would still be mind-boggling to listen to.
They do that with TV commentary. The actors talk over it sometimes.
Yeah, but there's more voices, right? It's not like just us two. Like, our voices are the dominant voices, and then our voices are the dominant voices over top of it. You know what I mean?
It'd be a fun investigation of if our voices have changed since 2017.
You're right.
Man,
well, we're not doing that.
Too bad TV commentary tracks are probably going away forever, right? So,
yeah, well, I mean, there was that, special showing of, Knives Out with director's commentary, wasn't there? They do that with movies sometimes.
Yeah.
For real nerds.
I just mean, R.I.P. discs, season collections, special features.
Yeah.
But no, sorry, I got my joke
reels.
out of the way. Go ahead. Let's play streaming. Let's start the show.
So yeah, I just want to talk a little bit about, the history of Let's Plays, how YouTube and Twitch have sort of, fit into things, how do they relate to gaming companies that might want to either use them as a marketing tool or are against them for other reasons, and related to that, all these sort of issues that people are having with DMCA and other copyright systems too.
Nice contained topic.
Yeah, I think so. I think it'll be good.
So I did a little research. I'm sure you did the same research on kind of the history of Let's Plays. And I was just reading an article this week about the history of cancel culture and how it gets attributed to someone who used it in a context that is not how we use cancel culture. And then in reading all this history of Let's Play stuff, I was like, everything seems tied to this one Kotaku article. Everyone's like, this is the history. It's like, I hope that article was right. But while Let's Plays, as a concept of playing through a game and offering commentary as you do it, have been around since the VHS days. The term, at least popularly, is regarded as being created by someone in the forums over at Something Awful, which you probably haven't thought about in a long time, but is one of the kind of not early internet, but the earlier internet meme generators of our time.
Yeah.
And came up with the term sometime in the 2005 to 2007 zone somewhere, mythically about some kind of playthrough of Oregon Trail, although that's really just based on people's memories. That actual thread does not exist anymore, which is in itself fascinating, that there is just nothing about games history that we can ever preserve, or internet history that we can ever preserve.
Yeah. They definitely, regardless of when it started, though, they definitely did adopt the term over there, because they created, like, a whole, like, section that was for Let's Plays, that people would, like, host their, at least early on, it would be their text-based and screenshot-based, Let's Plays, which I knew about Something Awful beforehand, because, like, a lot of people, like, there was a Danganronpa 1 Let's Play where the person was translating it, as they went through it, too. So, because it wasn't over here, that a lot of people in that fandom are like, that's the reason why they ended up localizing it, because that Let's Play was so popular, that it actually gained, like, it made the game gain a relatively strong fan community in the West, which made it viable for localization.
So shout out to Slow Beef for coining this very important term in games and game culture. I love when articles have to talk about people's handles.
Yeah, it's funny.
Slow Beef. I just love people's handles in general. So, you know, around this time, you know, in that late aughts zone, YouTube appears on the scene.
Horror Sting plays.
And at the time, everyone thinks, videos? That's not gonna last. And little did they know, it would become a ideological cesspool just a short few years later.
Yeah.
But obviously, as video, it's weird to think, for me, as someone who theoretically lived and knew the internet before YouTube, despite the fact that theoretically I did have that experience as a child, it is still weird to me to think of, like, oh yes, videos on the internet are really only about, 15 years old. It's sort of wild.
Yeah, I mean, unrelated, sort of, but, like, I definitely remember, like, we had so many, like, DVDs of TV shows that we were watching, that we would put, like, the one in our room just has, like, a DVD player, like, built into the TV.
Yeah.
So you just, like, put it in there. And, like, I remember that clearly, and yet it still feels weird that, like, Netflix didn't exist back then.
But it did. It was discs.
Oh, that's true. You're right. The streaming service Netflix didn't exist back then. We went to Blockbuster pretty regularly.
Sometimes multiple times a day. In the early days of TV binges, I sort of remember being like we were watching The Office or something, and it's like we had to go back many times to get those discs.
Anyway.
But yeah, so videos happened, and obviously, these text-based Let's Plays, well, some of us still make them by exploiting our significant others for content. Who's that? Let's Plays definitely became a video-based medium, and of course they did. They work much better that way. They make much more sense that way. They're also much more copyright that way. But it definitely, ignoring the law, that's where it belongs on the YouTubes or the Vimeos, I guess, if you're feeling very counterculture.
Yeah.
And Let's Plays kind of took over YouTube in a weird way in those early days, and became very, very mainstream in a way that, of course, nobody's parents would have known about. Like, as of 2014... right? And obviously this has, YouTube has changed significantly since 2014, and let's talk about that. And the just video landscape has changed a lot since then. But I thought it was interesting that as of 2014, 11 of the top 20 subscribed YouTube channels were primarily Let's Play channels. So it really speaks to how this really exploded in a very short amount of time, and how in a lot of ways it really drove YouTube's growth
Yeah.
in a way that might not have been apparent if you were an old.
Yeah, I didn't think to look up like what the top channels are for YouTube now, but I would be curious. I'm not sure if it would be more or less, honestly.
Yeah.
Feels like either's feasible.
Yeah, it's that balance of, you know, theoretically games are even more popular now, or going to get even more popular with every passing year, right? And the ability to capture footage from games gets even more sophisticated with every passing year. So in some sense, you think it'd be more. On the other hand, as I'm sure we'll talk about in depth, YouTube is certainly not the most reliable way to make money. That should be the end of the sentence, I guess. But YouTube is certainly not the most reliable way to make money, even if you are just looking at the small subset of, I am a person who would like to make some money playing video games.
Yeah. Plus, just I know that there's like big YouTube communities that I'm just like not tapped into, right? Like beauty YouTube.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's some beauty YouTubers up in the top 20 that I would never have heard of.
You know what? Thinking about it, I'm sure that the top 20 channels on YouTube would be upsetting and disappointing. That's not targeted at beauty YouTube. I'm sorry, that felt connected and I didn't mean it to me. It just connected.
Putting on lipstick. I'm so disappointed.
I mean, I am. Lipstick is like 2020 killed lipstick. Come on. Aren't we done with that?
I mean, I don't think sharing lipstick was ever like a thing.
I didn't mean for a germ reason. I mean, who has anyone to impress anymore? Have we not sunk low enough? I'm just kidding. Of course, do your thing, lipstick people. I barely wore makeup to begin with, so who am I to talk? Yeah, no, I'm sure that the top 20 channels on YouTube would include like Ben Shapiro and like horrifying. I hope it wouldn't. Maybe the game. I mean, I don't know. Is PewDiePie better or worse? But
yeah,
I'm sure that there would be some stuff in there that's like, ooh, yikes.
Yeah. There are definitely still some very big gaming YouTube channels.
For sure. Not to say that gaming YouTube is dead. That's not what I mean. But it was interesting to me, you know, as someone who, despite the fact that I co-run a gaming podcast, I have not become a person who is spending a lot of time watching Twitch streams. It's just not, yeah, it's just like not how I engage with games. This is sounding like a dig. It's not. But I just haven't, I don't know. I'm overwhelmed. I don't know who I would watch.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of stinkers out there. Not you, streamer or YouTuber who is listening to this podcast. You're a diamond in the rough, but there sure are a lot of stinkers out there.
Yes. I know a few streamers, so definitely not you all. You're doing great. So I guess let's chat about that, because I do feel like in some ways the golden age of the Let's Play has sort of passed, or has changed. And Twitch is, I think, well, in some ways, Twitch is the big driver of that.
Yeah. I mean, I think that if you were to look at some of the big ones, while they may still have, like, Let's Play content, you'll probably also find that they have a lot of more, like, variety, in that they'll check out a game for one video and then won't come back to it, right? Yeah. More for, like, comedy purposes, I guess. Tends to be some of the bigger ones. So even the idea of, like, starting a game and going all the way through that, like, a lot of gaming YouTubers have sort of, or even Twitch streamers have sort of moved away from that approach to playing games on video.
And there's a lot of reasons behind that. I mean, number one is obviously streaming is a lot lower work impact than making a Let's Play, right? Like, big major difference here. I mean, not that streaming, you know, people who are streaming are in some ways, frequently anyway, doing a Let's Play live. But
Yeah.
there's definitely a distinction between this is an edited video and I'm live on stream chatting with you while I play.
Yeah. I would just say that the work is different.
Sure.
Right? Like, if you say you do, like, equivalent amounts of work in that you play a certain amount and then you have to edit it, and then you have to put it up online, versus you're just streaming and entertaining people for the same amount of time. Like, it's like Let's Plays has, like, more, I guess, technical work to it, provided that you don't hire an editor to do that for you. Whereas a streamer is kind of like a service job in a lot of ways.
That's fair. I didn't mean to devalue how difficult it is to be kind of like on for fans and engaging with fans and all the work that goes into that around that. I guess I just meant in some ways, just in terms of pure amount of time spent, you can generate more content on streaming live on Twitch than you can for that amount of hours editing a video that's going to go on YouTube. Yeah.
And there's definitely the difference of, like just going on and you're doing it, right? Versus, like, you play the thing and you're like, actually, that wasn't that good. And you have trouble with the edit and stuff like that. Whereas one is like, well, it's done. You're doing it now and you did it. The other one's like, well, you're doing it now, but then you have to do it later.
Yeah. It's like your capture card didn't work right for that moment. So you have to go back. Or, any number of things that can add more work. But apart from that, which, to me, it does sort of feel like it's just a matter of what kind of work you enjoy, right? Like, for you, Emma, I imagine that you would, if you were forced into this career, you would probably prefer the work that goes into creating Let's Play videos than the work that would be involved in being a streamer.
I mean, I have trouble being on for, like, an hour meeting. I can't imagine being on for, like, 5 hours of streaming.
Yeah.
But
even putting that aside, I sort of was aware of this a little bit, but it did shock me still the more I read about how monetization works on YouTube versus how monetization works on Twitch. And how, basically on Twitch, you can know the money that you're making. Whereas on YouTube, it's just this nebulous, like, how many YouTube Red subscribers watched my video this time?
Yeah, I would say also that there's, like, with streaming, and you can stream on YouTube, right?
Yeah.
But with streaming, there's, like, more opportunity for money. Because people can donate to you, or they can subscribe / become a member of your channel. Whereas if you're just posting a video, it's basically just your, like, ad revenue and, like, other weird nebulous factors. And that's assuming that your video doesn't get demonetized for some reason. You have to figure that out, or... Yeah, basically it's a miracle that anyone ever makes any money on YouTube, I think, is the big takeaway. Yeah. And I think the thing is that, like, less and less people use YouTube as their primary income fund. Like, using it as supplementary along with Twitch streaming, or they have a Patreon, or they have, like, coffee, or some other way where people can more directly give them money than ad revenue. Definitely. I mean, what I think shocked me the most is just the idea that, on one hand, of course, like, you make more money the more people watch your video. In some ways, it's as straightforward as that. However, I was surprised, this again, should be obvious, but I had never thought about it, that, hey, at different times of year, I mean, YouTube sells the ads, right? Yeah. And it's about the money that YouTube gets paid for the ads, per 1,000 views or whatever it is. So... But the amount that YouTube sells the ads for varies for all sorts of reasons that have absolutely nothing to do with your content. It just varies in the time of year, right? And how many people are expected to be watching and the demand. It varies based on how the stock market is doing. It varies based on any number of things. And,
yeah, just like the idea of having to play that guessing game of, even if I get the exact same number of views every month, the amount of money I make can fluctuate wildly.
Yeah.
And that you make, like, YouTube Red is just baffling. But that's, that it's like, oh, we look at all the YouTube Red subscribers and what they watch, and you get your percentage.
It's sort of like Spotify, isn't it?
I don't know how Spotify works. I just know Spotify doesn't, you don't make any money. That's all I know.
Well, that's why it's sort of the same, isn't it?
Fair enough. Fair enough. But, like, at least the ads one, it's like, okay, I get it. The ads sell for different amounts. YouTube Red is just like, what are you doing here, folks? Like, that's a mess.
With YouTube, too, there's, like, a certain, like, you have to be a certain largeness before you're even allowed to start making money.
Yeah.
Which is, like, not small. Like, I don't know the exact thing. I think they
it's
pushed
1,000
it up
subscribers
recently. Yeah. Which, like, you have to put a pretty decent amount of effort in before you start seeing any return for your investment. Whereas if you, like, go to Twitch, like, your mom could donate $5 to you right there. And, you know, you're making money. No cutoff there.
Exactly. There are a lot of things that are not great about Twitch, but it certainly seems like, I mean, yeah, unless you are just a person who is not into streaming and just, like, that's not who you are, then it just seems like the obvious choice for having any degree of income stability.
Yeah.
Especially given the kind of murky gray ground that things like Let's Plays and streaming in general exists in the copyright arena.
Yeah. Especially it's been getting worse recently with certain ways that Twitch has been implementing things, and YouTube's always been a mess, but apparently Twitch has been getting worse too recently, of just like there's like a whole bunch of like auto bans a while ago that people were getting upset about or scared about, or it was like things like way back in like your uploads in Twitch, because you can save your streams onto your Twitch either as uploads or just like you can just mark broadcasts to save.
Video on demand so that people can watch later.
Yeah, so like they implemented this stricter policy where they would like be going back to videos that people had posted like 5 years ago and like striking the channel based on those. So there were a lot of streamers who had to go back and like just delete all their past videos because they didn't know what was in there anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, definitely I'd heard about this kind of Twitch purge kind of thing, and they've definitely cracked down on copyrighted music. I think they're more in recent times as well. I think that's coming from, you know, Twitch has been known and was founded as a thing for games. I think they're trying to move away from that. Not in terms of, like, they don't want to continue to be a destination for games, but, you know, they're already the destination for games. There's not the market share. There's, you know, there's no one else who could compete at this point. So I've read a little bit about, you know, they're wanting to diversify what Twitch is a little bit, which makes sense because there's huge amounts of other industries that could probably use Twitch in a way that makes Twitch a lot of money.
Yeah. But that's why you will find games, like big games now coming out with like an option to turn off copyrighted music, which may or may not work. It's more likely to work than leaving it on, I guess, but for instance, not to harp on this game too much, but Cyberpunk's no copyrighted music mode did in fact still have a copyrighted song in it. So,
so yikes.
Yikes. But the solution before then would just be like, y'all, you mute your stream for a minute. because nothing you can do about it. Or, talk really loudly over it for a while. Yeah, so that's, like, become, like, an important option to include in your game if you want people to stream it, right? Because nobody's gonna risk losing their channel over your game.
Yeah, and that's I think also what makes YouTube so unstable as an income source, because at least with Twitch, right? I don't know. My understanding is that DMCA on Twitch is you a little bit like it's a little bit less crackdowny in some cases, in some ways. Not always. In audio, I think across all platforms these days, it's just constant muting and constant. You just can't have anything. You can't use anything, even in any kind of, like, obviously, who would ever care about this on my personal Facebook way.
Yeah.
So I get that. But on YouTube, I think that you just hear every day about people getting demonetized for reasons that aren't real. And on YouTube, that's all your money. All your money goes away. I mean, these days they keep it in escrow. So if you can appeal it, you get it. But for a long time, it was just like, well, while you're fighting that strike or fighting that, this random record company has claimed all your ad revenue or whatever, like, you just didn't get that money. And on Twitch, your subscribers don't go away, right? Your donations don't go away. And that's where you're making your money anyway on that, right? You're not making your money on ads on Twitch relative. If you're, assuming you're semi-successful, it's not the ads that are making you money. It's your subscribers.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's definitely still issues of, like, your channel just going away.
Sure.
On Twitch. But you're right that YouTube is more based on, like, video to video, and if one video gets demonetized, it's rough. And it's not always for, like, copyright reasons either. They can demonetize it because it's, like, unfit for advertisers, which theoretically is because, like, adult content or whatever, but also sometimes is just, like, LGBT content or something like that. So it gets sketchy, basically.
Yeah. And all of this, though, like, putting audio aside, because audio is sort of its own beast these days. But Let's Plays, as I think we talked about a little bit in a previous episode that Emma and I don't even remember, clearly, so you probably don't either. But they exist in this, like I said, this kind of murky legal gray area of what kind of a work is this? Because you're using copyrighted material. It's material that you don't own, that's definitely owned by many other people and many other companies frequently, but at least one other company and one other person. And while some games these days will include some kind of like a streaming license in their terms of service, and certainly that's more common now than it was even like 5 years ago, right? Most still don't. And most don't have they haven't formalized that permission. And so you're basically operating and screaming to the ether, it's a transformative work, it's fair use, and hoping that nobody ever actually goes to court about this. Because listeners, you probably know, but I see people misunderstand on the internet all the time. Fair use is not a law. It is, in fact, a legal defense. And if you're relying on it as a legal defense, that means that you might potentially have to go to court and have the money to go to court to defend yourself.
Yeah. I mean, that is part of how, like, you deal with strikes, too, before you get to court.
Sure.
But it doesn't immediately go from strike to legal defense all the time.
Well, but still, though, in that case, then, okay, so it's not the 6 figures you might need to pay a lawyer for a court case against Nintendo or something. It's instead do you make enough money elsewhere that you cannot make money on this video while you appeal the fair use? You appeal on fair use, right?
Yeah. Yes. But yes, it basically just depends whether the person you're fighting is a killjoy or not.
Well, let's talk about that. Let's talk about we've talked a lot about, like, why would you ever want to do this? What a horrible and draining and risky way to make your money side of being a streamer or being a Let's Play maker. Let's talk about, okay, so you're a game developer. Why would you ever want to let someone do this to your work? Or conversely, why would you ever care that someone is doing this to your work? It's a great thing.
Yeah. So there's, like, basically two schools of thought on this. Well, I mean, my school of thought is generally like, oh boy, what a heckin' hassle it would be to ban Let's Plays on your game. But putting that aside, there's like two schools of thought, which is one, that people playing the game gets more eyes on it, which gets more interest in it, which means that more people might pay attention to your game. So you'll see games like giving streamers and Let's Players like early codes so that they can show it off to their followers before the release, or you'll see them just providing the code on release day so that they'll play it for their followers. Or, you'll see indie game companies contacting YouTubers and streamers to see if they will play their game. And promote it, basically. The other school of thought is that the people watching those Let's Plays now aren't going to buy your game, right? Like, because they can get the content from watching someone, and so you're losing sales by allowing people to Let's Play your game, basically. There's also, like, spoilers, which has become, like, a new concern of game companies, of being like, you can play it, but not past this specific point, because we wouldn't want people to be spoiled. They might, click on a part 40 of a Let's Play, and then they might be mad because it's spoiled them.
Emma, how do you feel about that? It's not clear.
It seems silly to me. Like, whatever. Make the people warn about spoilers after a certain point. I don't know. The whole spoiler culture makes me concerned. That's all.
Look, I get it as a person who's like, please don't put the spoiler in your title, at least for a few weeks, right?
Sure.
Just,
yeah.
like, the YouTube algorithm is so hard to control that I get that concern, but being like, you can't stream at all past July 7th is, in Persona 5, is so, it's like, come on.
Yeah.
I don't have a lot of, I don't have a lot of sympathy for the it's gonna decrease sales argument, personally. It's documented. Yeah. It's like, you can see it. There's countless examples of the actual commercial benefit of, like, a truly large streamer streaming your game. Like, the PewDiePie effect, as they like to call it online, as much as that makes me throw up in my mouth a little bit, is real. Like, you can see it. When he plays a game, especially, like, a smaller game, or, like, a game where you would be able to actually see a sales bump, right? There is one, right? It's just demonstrably true. And I get
sometimes it doesn't happen, but I would say it's more likely to have no effect on your sales than it is to have a negative effect on your sales.
Exactly. Now, I'll say, of course, that's really targeted at small to mid-sized developers, right? Like, if you're an indie studio or you're a AA studio, right, you're going to benefit from just more people hearing about your game. So I do feel like, unless you are a AAA studio, what are you even worrying about here? Isn't your whole battle getting people to hear about the game? And even sometimes as a AAA studio, it's like, isn't your whole battle to get people to, like, hear about this game and actually think it's fun? And not, like, a Call of Duty clone or what, like, Like, isn't it better that people are seeing a taste of this beyond your trailers, which no one trusts anymore anyway. So there's that. I'm a teeny bit more sympathetic on the AAA front, except at that point it's just like, I don't know. I just don't believe that most of the time people are watching something and then they decide that something they otherwise would have bought they're not going to buy.
Yeah.
I think it's so much more likely that they see it and they're like, ah, yes, the chicken in the bowling alley is funny. Let me buy this game.
Yeah.
So to me, it's just like the idea of these phantom lost sales for most games seems to me to be sort of like, but like, I don't think that that's real. The one place where I'm more sympathetic to that is in games that are heavily narrative based. Not to be like there's a story, but I mean where most of the gameplay is narrative based.
Yeah.
I could see those games actually genuinely having people who are like, well, I was going to buy it, but instead I watched someone play it. Because in those cases, theoretically, this is not to talk down on these games in any way, but theoretically in those cases, the experience of watching someone play it is much closer to the experience of you playing it.
Yeah.
Even if there are important things that are lost that are not necessarily as obvious as don't get to hit X button to hit with key. But yeah.
I'm also always a little bit, well, I go back and forth on this, in that, like, I understand, like, no commentary Let's Plays.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I don't really think you should be making ad revenue off of that. But, like, in terms of, like, archival purposes, and, like, storing long plays and no commentary Let's Plays as a way of preserving things, since, hey, nobody will do that.
Yeah, it's a shame that we have to be like, oh, those are serving a valuable purpose that no one else is doing. I appreciate those. Look, I agree. Like, those ones, unless something about your gameplay is incredibly distinctive, like, I could imagine, I mean, like a no commentary speedrun, right? Which is, of course, an entire other thing. Yeah. Or a no commentary, I don't know, the dude has to do a dance move every time. Like, if you were to make some kind of a joke gameplay that had no commentary, I mean, why would you? You should be making jokes, but whatever. Like, I can see there being things that's like, oh, okay, this game is being played in this very specific way, and, like, that's fine to me. But yeah, I agree that, it's sort of like, oh, this is not really a transformative work anymore, it's just the work.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just, as much as I appreciate them when I'm researching games for Talk This, because I'm like, I don't know which of these Let's Players I'm going to find incredibly grating, and which one I'm going to find, like, a useful addition to my, like, wanting to see what this game that I'm not spending $60 on, or I don't have the system for, or whatever, is like. So as much as I appreciate no commentary Let's Plays for my podcast research, I also feel like, from a company perspective, yeah, absolutely, demonetize the heck out of those.
I definitely use them like walkthroughs sometimes too when I get stuck.
Yeah.
I'll look up a no commentary Let's Play and find where I am and be like, oh yeah, that's what I'm supposed to do. Okay.
Yeah. I will say on that narrative space though, I mean, you know, there was a semi-notorious spat over that Dragon Cancer, which is, you know, obviously this like very heavy, highly narrative driven game.
Very personal game too.
Yes, that too, which I think is probably very relevant here, where with these there were some commentary free playthroughs that were uploaded, and particularly that were uploaded with like no link to buy the game, no information really about the creators of the game and that kind of thing. And so the developer there like used DMCA to try to take those down from that perspective. From the perspective of like, this isn't being credited and you're not providing any way for me to make money off of this, which it's tricky to defend that, because it does feel like in some ways it's a slippery slope toward, in the same way with Campo Santo's like very notorious DMCAing of PewDiePie, when he had a Let's Play of Firewatch. I just started to doubt myself.
Firewatch, yeah.
Of Firewatch from some years ago, and then later on used racial slurs in his videos. Not in the Firewatch video, in other videos. But the folks at Campo Santo just felt that having him play their game constituted like a tacit endorsement of his behavior, and so as a result, like Content ID'd his video, basically. And there was controversy around it because he didn't say the racial slur in that video. And it basically just underlines the fact of any company could do this for any reason at any time. And they might get some bad press about it, depending on the reason that they did it or who they did it to. But pretty much all of these people making their livelihoods on this, at any time, a company could decide, oh, actually, we're not doing this anymore, and just pull everything.
Yeah. Like, those two examples you brought up, I am definitely sympathetic to the developer in both of those cases. But yeah, it's always, like, how do you decide, like, where, like, what is okay and what isn't,
And that's why we're seeing more and more games that have, like, actual streaming guidelines along with them, and I think that that's going to become more and more and more common, like, saying, hey, if you're going to stream this, you're not going to say anything racist or sexist or homophobic or whatever. You're not going to upload it commentary free. You're not going to, like, any number of rules, right?
Yeah.
And that having those around, I think, is going to lead to a little bit more clarity, but also all of the MCA lacks clarity at all times. That's, like, what it has to be, apparently. So watching for more and more companies over these next few years being like, oh, this is money that we're not making. We should be making some of this money. In the way that Nintendo does, I think.
Yeah.
To stream Nintendo games, you have to be a Nintendo affiliate, which means that Nintendo gets some of your ad revenue. I don't know how that works on Twitch. I don't know if they get if there's subscriber money that goes to Nintendo or how that works. But on YouTube, they definitely get a portion of your ad revenue.
Yeah, they're pretty strict about that too.
Which is, of course, very Nintendo.
Yeah,
right?
It's a very Nintendo.
Nintendo, look, they come across as a bad guy for it, and in some ways they are a bad guy for it, but they're also seemingly, like, the only company that's, I mean, they're pretty consistent about their IP, right? They actually defend it, and they're definitely within the letter of the law doing that. What makes them look bad is that many other companies just don't do that in the same way. And it's more probably just a mark on the copyright system here and how it works than anything else. But they're certainly within the letter of the law, and I'm sure that many of these other AAA companies are gonna move towards something similar. Because if you're a big enough company, you certainly don't need people streaming your game, right?
Yeah. Remember, though, on March 31st, Mario dies.
Yeah.
For real.
They will take down Oh, boy. Do you think on April 1st they're just gonna, like, full on be like, all videos of this have to come off the internet?
Oh, boy. Just Mario will suddenly disappear from the internet.
Yeah.
They won't even take down videos. They'll just suddenly be like a big white splotch over all videos where Mario is.
Winnie the Pooh style.
Yeah. Speaking of DMCA, have you been following the Sinking City situation?
Oh my gosh, what a mess.
I know,
what a
right?
hot mess.
This is off topic, but just because I don't know what topic we would talk about to talk about this, but the developers of The Sinking City is accusing their publisher basically of stealing their game and putting it up on Steam without their permission. So they used DMCA to strike their own game off of Steam, which is wild. And the publisher is claiming that in the contract they gave them all this stuff, and they're saying no. So that's a fun situation. That's a fun DMCA example. What a fun thing to study in your law class.
What an absolutely not the way this was intended to be used, but very important way to use it. Use of DMCA.
Yeah.
Like, to protect your own content from... I mean, you know, whatever. Like, that is the point, right? To make sure your content is where it's supposed to be, but, like, to protect your content that has been released without your consent.
Yeah.
Well, do you want to close a little bit about talking about how Let's Plays and streaming have become perhaps even more important to people over the course of the last year?
Yeah. Just like sort of everything. Streaming, like every like form of entertainment that you can just do in your house. Streaming has become, like, a lot of streamers have found themselves getting more popular over the past year because more people are watching them for the sake of, you know, something to do and, like, fake socialization, I guess.
The facsimile of being able to see people that you know.
Yeah. Like, you feel like you're socializing even though you're not, that whole thing. And so you've seen sort of like this, a lot of streamers have found themselves with, like, bigger audiences, and, like, in some ways it's a bit of a double-edged sword because, like, yes, you're more successful now, but if you weren't prepared for that influx, you also find yourself sort of struggling to stay on top of it, in terms of, like, as soon as when your channel gets big enough, you need to get moderators, and you have to be able to, you know, sort of handle, like, people in your chat or people in your comments, and sort of policing that, or you just don't, and everybody's miserable, I guess.
It was interesting to me, though, to see some articles that were talking about kind of YouTube versus Twitch, and how pretty much all of them were like, well, it's not as bad as YouTube comments, even if it's really bad. It's like, at least it's gone when you're done.
That's fair.
At least you can't wake up to 100 comments of people telling you that it's a terrible video. And at least most people are there because they like you. Unless you're a really giant channel.
Yeah, I mean, I think the difference maybe is, like, having to respond to things in the moment versus being able to respond to things not in the moment.
For sure.
Is also, like, a contrast there. And if you're a Twitch channel, you're probably more likely to have moderators than if you're a Let's Play channel.
Well, there's just no way. YouTube doesn't really have a functional way to have moderators. You know, if you have people who are genuinely working for you and are signed in as you, they can moderate as you. But
oh, really? Is that how it works?
As far as I could tell, I didn't do a ton of looking into this.
I haven't looked into it at all. I just know that there are channels that have moderators that can delete comments, but I didn't know they would have to sign into your account.
Okay, so I'll defer to... I don't know enough about this, but it was my understanding that YouTube doesn't have a super functional, like, moderator system, at least relative to Twitch's.
There are definitely ones for streams. I don't really know how comments work.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, like, I don't know. I just can't imagine being a streamer. It seems so awful.
Look, if you're an extrovert in that way, right? I could get how it would be fun.
But, like, I've read things about, like, people, like, big streamers taking a day off and, like, losing 1 million subscribers.
Yeah.
Like, it's just like that, like, we talked about inconsistency on YouTube, but in that way, there is some, like, inconsistency on Twitch, too. Because, like, what if I'm sick that day and just, like, a large portion of my subscriber base thinks, F that guy for having a fever?
No, it's true. I mean, there's definitely, like, on YouTube, there's definitely a model that's, you make a video a month. There's also a model that's you upload every day, right?
Yeah.
But there is, if you're the right kind of channel, a viable financial model where you're making more long-form content and you don't upload as often. And, like, maybe you have a life. No, you're spending all your time editing. But, like, maybe you sort of have a life outside it. Not that you can't do that on Twitch, but there's definitely a lot more pressure, I think, as a streamer to at least have a very regular schedule. But even to ideally be streaming every day if you're serious about it. And you're absolutely right to call out that, as in any service profession, that being on for people in that way is challenging, and especially in a service profession like streaming, where, and this is not really the streamer. I mean, sometimes this is actively cultivated, and it's part of just the name of the game. But the parasocial relationships that you essentially make your money on, this is not unique to Twitch. It's just what social media is these days. But definitely put you even more so than if you were like a waitress, or something like that. There is a lot of pressure around how you interact with your fans, and I was reading a few weeks ago about like how like femme presenting streamers deal with like giant donations and the like horrible pressure and kind of sexist nonsense around that. Yeah. It's it's kind of horrible to think about, of like, oh, like you make a ton of money, but also what are the expectations around that, and people, because they're subscribing to you, feel entitled to attention.
I don't really know if banning the word simp was the right way for Twitch to go, but also I genuinely despise that word so much. Like, at the same, I was like, maybe banning that word isn't quite right. Like, it seems like we're, but at the same time, like, yes, remove that word.
No, like, I mean, this is too much to talk about now, but like the whole nonsense around like donation sizes and like capping your donations and that kind of thing, that's been like a little more in vogue recently too. It's so interesting and so amazing how people can take anything and make it a tool to make people feel oppressed and uncomfortable. Yeah. But what about go ahead. You're gonna say what I'm gonna say, I think. Go ahead.
Am I? You go ahead.
I see where your cursor is in the notes, so I think I know what you're going to say. So go ahead.
Okay. So sort of on, like, both sides of that, like, depending on your opinion of Twitch streamers, there was this pretty controversial tweet a couple weeks ago from No Cocoa Puffs, who I know nothing about him, first of all. So I think he does esports or something, or he's Apex Legends player. And he tweeted, like, to his streamer friends, I recently ended up getting a personal chef to cook meals for me for the week. Instead of spending easily $1,400 a month on fast food, I now spend $800 to $1,000 a month on home-cooked fresh food made in my own home. Is the best decision I've ever made. Which, like, on one hand, I'm like, man, you've got so much money. Right? I understand that side of it. And there are a lot of people making fun of him for spending that much on fast food, which I honestly don't think it's that much. Like, I doubt he's just ordering burgers, like, from McDonald's.
Right. If there's 30 days a month, and that means he's spending, like, $50 a day.
Yeah. Which for, like, assuming, like, he might buy lunch and dinner. Yeah. And he's, like, a grown adult man, so probably eats more than I do. It doesn't sound that unreasonable to me.
No, it's definitely I mean, it's a certain kind of pre-pandemic anyway, New York City lifestyle as well, outside of the streaming community of like, you get your lunch at Sweet Green and you just don't cook, right? Yeah. And there's like definitely an inherent level of privilege to that, right? Like that's, I hope that goes without saying, but I should say it. But yeah, to me it didn't sound like, given that this guy is ordering out 2 meals a day and maybe sometimes getting a late night snack because he's a late night streamer, maybe ordering coffee sometime, and he's paying delivery fees on top of the food and tipping. That to me didn't sound like that unreasonable, assuming he lives in a semi-major city. Like, it's unreasonable in that, like, I could never afford that. But
and there's like people being like, well, why don't like just cook for yourself? And it's like, one thing for being a streamer is that you might be on camera for like 6 hours a day. And that's tiring. And like, I don't know, like when are you cooking for yourself during that time? I guess if you were like really responsible, you could like have a day where you like cook all your meals ahead of time, but who does that? Does anyone in this world actually do that?
I used to sort of do it, but like the pandemic has proven to me how boring what I was eating was because of that. Because it's like, oh my god, now that I can like actually cook, during the day when I'm home if I want to, it's like, oh my god, I'm eating so much better. Anyway,
so I feel like, again, I know nothing about this guy, but like just taking the tweet as a base thing, like, yes, it feels very privileged, but also like, good for you. You're eating healthy now. I don't think you're like, if you're eating out for all your meals, like I don't think that seems like a reasonable amount you were spending, and now you're spending less and you're eating healthy. Great.
Especially assuming you're a streamer who's streaming 6 hours a day or however much. I don't know what are the peak times for viewers to be streaming Apex Legends, right? But assuming that some of those times are through like reasonable meal times, of course you're ordering food. If you're streaming like 4 to 10 p.m., for instance, there is no way, like, frankly, when I'm on Zoom calls from 4 to 10 p.m., or if I'm on Zoom calls even from like 10 to 2 in the nightmare days where I have like Zoom calls from 10 to 2, I'm like, clickbait boyfriend, make lunch for me. By the end of that, I'm like, I'm tired. I don't even want to like cut the bread for my lunch. Like, please be my, like, I have a personal chef, so I can't even really complain. No, to me it's like, it definitely, like, it's a little bit in the same way as like, whatever, Chrissy Teigen gets hate every couple of months for saying something about whatever that tweet she had. I don't know if you plug into Twitter celebrity gossip occasionally like I do, but there was like a tweet she had a couple months ago about her and John Legend accidentally ordering like a $10,000 bottle of wine that the waiter didn't even let them finish, right? And everyone was like, oh, the privilege. And it's like, maybe with streamers it feels uncomfortable because you don't think of them as being as rich as they are. Yeah. Right? Yeah. And it feels a little bit uncomfortable because they're making their money off of
just playing video games.
Well, yeah, of course. Yeah, it's like we implicitly think that they don't deserve the money because they're having fun, even if they're not having fun. They're performing having fun. And because they're making their money off of like people who presumably don't have that amount of money, right? Yeah. So I understand like having a kind of a reaction to the optics of it, but given that this is a dude that makes, I mean, there are people out there that make 6 figures. They don't have to be streamers. Assuming you are a person who makes $100,000 a year as a single person, spending $1,000 a month on a personal chef and all the food, right? Yeah, is not that unreasonable. Yeah, to me. Also, it's a really cheap personal chef. Holy crap, I hadn't even thought about that. If that includes the food costs in addition to the chef costs, like, dang, dude, who's doing that for you?
I assume they just, like, come, like, a couple, like, they're not there all the time.
I think he says that they make him meals, like, 2 or 3 times a week. Or they come once a week and they make him, like, 2 or 3 meals. to eat through. Like, it didn't sound like this dude was like, yes, this chef comes every night and makes me a filet mignon.
Yeah. He's not this chef's full-time job. It doesn't seem like.
Exactly.
So.
I mean, I get that. You know, it all harkens back to, I don't know if you've seen this everywhere, of like, minimum wage only really works, and the whole, like, 8-hour workday and everything, full-time job, 40-hour work week only works when you have domestic help, right? Mm-hmm. And, like, that's why people were able to do it for a certain period, or that's why upper middle class white people were able to do it for a certain period of time, because they pretty universally had hired help doing the chores and doing the cooking for them. And that's why we all feel like we're struggling now, because we're doing things that even the people that we idolize as being able to do these things didn't do.
Yeah.
And this feels tied to that. Not to compare streamers to 1950s housewives or whatever, but it does feel to live in the same world of, whatever, dude. Don't tell us your weed budget, right? Like, I'm glad you're talking to us about your personal health budget, and not about your, like, stimulants budget. Like, that's great.
On that note, thanks for listening.
Yeah, thanks for listening to this episode of Talk This.
It's dangerous to podcast alone.
Check it out later when we post the audio on our YouTube, and then comment on it as we listen.
No, thank you.
I'll make Josh do it.
No, thank you.
Quick Boyfriend, Let's Plays Talk This episode, whatever number this is.
Very good.
Anyway, listeners, thanks for tuning in. We hope you enjoyed the show. If you like what we're doing here, you should follow us on social media. We're on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube, although our videos there are not monetized. So, hey, subscribes. We're only like 970 away from being able to run ads. To our YouTube, all of those at Talk This Podcast. So check us out there. You can also check out our website, www.talkthispodcast.com, where you can read all about the show, check out the games that are in the hat for our main episodes, and read up on our blog, featuring kind of text-based Let's Play series, Click Like Boyfriend, where my boyfriend plays through the Kingdom Hearts series, and also Split Screen, where Emma and I are watching My Hero Academia and Coffee Prince. So check those out if you are bored by your streamer or they're taking a day off or something. Most importantly, you should subscribe to the show. We are on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, TuneIn, Spotify, Pandora Podcasts, online and on the app, Overcast, Pocket Cast, basically anywhere you can find podcasts, you can find Talk This.
Next week, we're talking about Amnesia, The Dark Descent, and The Pathless.
Get yourself ready now for a joke where I'm like, I forgot what the games were this week.
Oh ho ho ho!
It's too bad I don't have a plan for this episode. Maybe that will be the joke. Won't that be funny? That's like the exact joke, and I've thought of it right now. So tune in for that, and then in 2 weeks, the side quest format reaches its usual 6-week conclusion, where we talk about what we've been playing. Spoiler, I don't think I'm going to finish Yakuza 5 in time to hit my Yakuza game every 6 weeks.
No.
We'll see. I'm not really playing anything else, so maybe, but I've been playing too much Kiryu Taxi. And it's kind of derailed my playthrough, but not in a cabaret way, just in a I need to finish this before it rips me away from this way. Anyway, if you're interested in a podcast-based recap of the games we're playing, so kind of like a Let's Play, right? Not at all. Tune in 2 weeks, and also catch us next week for the main edition.
Do you want to sign us off, Colin?
Sure, listeners. This week, I hope you like and subscribe, and that your personal chef makes you some good meals.